Putting your toy trains to work. Realistic operation on toy train layouts on this episode of Toy Train Tips and Tricks. Hello again, this is Mike with another episode of Toy Train Tips and Tricks. Most toy train layouts are designed with one or more loops or figure eights upon which our trains will endlessly chase their tails. There's little to no effort to reproduce the actual dispatching, running, and switching operations of a real railroad. Instead, the layout operates in what I like to call goldfish mode. The motion, lights, and sounds help us to clear our minds of the stresses of the day. And there's nothing inherently wrong with this kind of operation. In fact, I often do it myself on my own layout. If I have a spare 30 or 45 minutes somewhere in the day, it's nice to go and flip a switch, watch the trains run until the rigors and deadlines and responsibilities compel me back to reality. But our model trains have the capacity to do more, even on small layouts. With onboard sounds, reliable operating couplers, deep flanges to reduce derailments, our model trains can easily become components of a model railroad, replicating to some extent the operations of a real railroad, past, present, or imaginary. I designed my layout to do both, possibly because of my childhood exposure to large operation-oriented HO scale railroads, as well as traditional O gauge. And although my current Phase 1 represents only a fraction of my planned completed layout, even in this roughly 5 by 10 foot space, I can not only run trains in goldfish mode, but I can also replicate real railroad operations. While many think of realistic operation as strictly for HO or N scalers, Frank Ellison, one of the pioneers of realistic model operation in the 1940s and 1950s, was himself an O-scale operator, although of the two-rail type. Before I go any farther, let me pause to say that there are different levels of realism involved in model railroad operation, just as there are different realism levels in our trains. Some like to operate scheduled trains with actual printed waybills for each car, describing not only its layout destination, but the load and the imaginary far-off origin of the carload. Others take a more freestyle view, such as, well, hey, that industry needs a loaded hopper car. Find one and put it there. My operation style can be described as being from the view of a typical rail fan. I don't have any waybills or paperwork, and while I don't need to know the precise origin, destination, or bill of lading of any individual car, I do pay attention to what cars would reasonably go to a particular industry and make logical train movements to place each car at its destination. So let's take a look at part of an operating session on my mythical Queen City lines, officially called the Ohio, Indiana, and Northern Kentucky Railway, but Queen City has a nicer ring to it than oink. This is the Winton Local. That's Winton spelled with a Y. As a musician and trumpeter, I try to name my layout towns with musical names, especially the names of famous trumpeters, which is where Winton gets its name. Also, there's an actual local community of Winton Place, spelled with an I, that is home to a large Procter & Gamble facility like my Menards Tide plant. So the name helps establish layout geography as well. My Queen City lines is a belt railroad, much like the Belt Railway of Chicago, so that trains sometimes feature home road power, or they will as soon as I finish painting and decorating them, or they can borrow equipment from the member railroads that make up the ownership. So today's local is headed by a chassis system GP38. Okay, it's really a GP39-2, as I described in a video that is linked in the description section of this episode. The local will be tasked with switching out cars from our Winton Tide factory, as well as those from the local intermodal facility. Our cars were pre-blocked for the two industries at Stradivarius Yard, so named because it's just a fiddle yard, as operators often describe them. Fiddle yard, get it? Also, Stradivarius is my preferred model of trumpet, so it fits with the theme. This blocking will reduce the time and effort needed by our local crew. With the bell ringing, our local takes the turnout from the main line to the industrial track. While this Lionel engine has an onboard horn, I like to use the Whistle Simulator app and Bluetooth speaker for a little bit more realism. Check out the video description for a link to another episode describing how I use this sound method. Also, for full disclosure, my phone equipment, which is my cameras, cannot simultaneously record video and control the sound of the speaker. So I did have to overdub the locomotive bell and horn sounds on this particular video, as I had no spare phones available using multiple cameras. Now we will need to cut off the caboose from the rear of the train, so we come to a stop with the caboose short of our industrial turnout, and the invisible brakeman exits the caboose and uncouples it from the rest of the cars. After the brakeman radios the engineer that the caboose is uncoupled, the engineer gives an audible signal with the horn and pulls forward, clear of the industrial spur. The brakeman then throws 2 turnouts so our train may pick up a couple of piggyback cars from our intermodal facility. This facility is set up to utilize both the Lionel number 460 piggyback ramp for short TOFC cars, trailer on flat car, but the Marx crane also provides the possibility of shipping and receiving longer trailers and containers as well. The brakeman radios the engineer, who again provides the audible acknowledgement and backs up. As the train approaches our outbound cars, the brakeman radios the engineer, 2 cars, 1 car, that'll do, as the cars collide and couple together. You may notice the use of Marx O27 turnouts here on the layout. I like Marx turnouts for this type of installation, but they do require just a little bit of tweaking to operate well with Lionel and other modern equipment. Also, during the filming, I discovered that the turnout on the right needed a slight repair, as the rivet that secures the inside rails had come loose. This accounts for the rougher than usual operation of the cars on this turnout. After filming, it required only a quick application of epoxy to reset the rails in place. For more information of how I utilize these Marx turnouts and make them more compatible with my Lionel fleet, check out the video link in the description of this video. Soon, the signal is given again to pull ahead until the outbound flat cars are clear of the switch. The turnout is thrown once again, and the outbound cars will join the caboose on the industrial cutoff track. With the outbound cars removed, now we have room to spot our inbound flat car at the number 460 piggyback ramp. So we repeat the previous process while leaving the outbound car behind. Now we move on to the tide plant. We will be picking up 2 boxcars and a tank car, and dropping off 3 boxcars. A factory like this would receive chemical ingredients in tank cars and/or covered hoppers, and the finished product could be distributed by boxcars. Loaded chemicals and empty boxcars would be inbound, while empty chemical cars and loaded boxcars would be outbound. First, our train pulls forward to clear the turnout to the Tide factory. Next, we reverse to tie onto the 3 outbound cars. Once tied together, our train now pulls forward, clear of the industrial cutoff turnout. Once again, the turnout is thrown and we reverse, adding these 3 outbound cars to our growing cut of cars. Now we pull forward with our last 4 cars, 3 inbound boxcars, and an idler boxcar, which is present on the train for the sole purpose of providing a buffer between the potentially hazardous tank car and our locomotive crew. It would also house the Bluetooth speaker for our locomotive sounds. Repeating the entire process again, we now leave our 3 inbound cars behind, pulling forward with only the buffer car. Backing once more, we couple our entire cut of outbound cars and caboose together. The brakeman walks the train, making sure all the cars are coupled and air hoses are tied together. The reassembled train pulls forward, clear of the mainline turnout. The brakeman returns this turnout to the mainline position, then hops back on the caboose as our train pulls away. Our train continues around the reverse track, heading back to Stradivarius Yard. And so, even with just a small portion of our 3-rail layout finished, we see how realistic operation can be incorporated into our toy train layouts to add variety to our running sessions. Our trains are built for more than just chasing their tails around loops and figure eights. Why not put them to work? I hope this has inspired you to find ways to add realistic operation to your layout. As always, I hope you enjoyed the video as much as I enjoyed making it, and if so, please let your friends, neighbors, and especially YouTube know by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. Whether chasing their tails in goldfish mode or switching in realistic ways, keep those trains running, and we'll catch you next time on Toy Train Tips and Tricks.